How's it going, people? You might be very much accustomed to this already if you're in Europe, the US or Australia in particular, but if you're in the UK, from the 1st of September in 2021, E10 fuel became the default fuel used in petrol stations around the region. This has caused a pretty sizable response from people from all walks of life, both positive and negative, and the media seems to have latched onto it entirely, with multiple new articles surfacing every day talking about it. But what actually is it? Why are some people complaining about it? And is it going to destroy your engine? Well, as always, I decided to grind out some research to get to the bottom of it all and let you know the facts and my thoughts around the introduction of E10 fuel. I would, however, love to hear your experiences with it or opinions on it, so please do drop a comment down below. Also, if you're new here, make sure you subscribe for 2 videos every single week and hit the like button if you enjoy this kind of content. But without further ado, let's get into the video. So let's start with the question, what is E10 fuel? Simply put, it's a mix of ethanol and petrol, and E10 refers to the maximum percentage of ethanol that you get in that mix. So E5 would be 5%, E10 would be 10%, E80 would be 80%, and so forth. And if E80 sounds like a ridiculous suggestion, it's not, as around the world cars run on E4 all the way through to E95 petrol, with countries like Brazil using E95 thanks to having an excess of crops that produce ethanol like sugarcane. You can even run a car on 100% ethanol, though it would of course have to be modified. So why do we mix ethanol with petrol anyway? A few key reasons include the fact that it's renewable, since it comes from crops that we can grow pretty rapidly, so it reduces the total amount of petrol required. Also, the high oxygen content can actually help the engine to combust fuel more thoroughly. Again, to put it simply, ethanol burns easily, so helps to burn the petrol too. And finally, it's better for the environment, both by reducing the amount of petrol required as discussed, but also because ethanol burns cleaner than petrol, with 2 carbon atoms released per molecule as opposed to 8 from petrol. That said, it's important to know that the more ethanol you put into the mix, the less energy you get for the total amount. So you would still have to burn more of a higher mix to get the same result. This means cars will not be as efficient, and therefore using E10 you should achieve slightly lower miles per gallon, with an estimated decrease by the Energy Information Administration of 3%. So for illustration's sake, if you burned 1 litre of E5 petrol, you'd have to burn 1.03 litres of E10 petrol to go the same distance. And by the way, that's a high estimate. Other sources, including from gov.uk, suggest 1 to 1.6% impact on efficiency. One benefit is that it's not necessarily more expensive than E5 fuel, and it's estimated that it should cost approximately 2p more per litre, so you'd have to fill up 50 litres worth to pay a quid more than E5 petrol. Now, with all this in mind, why are some people complaining so much about it? Well, the key problem stems from the fact that the higher ethanol content can be damaging to older cars in particular. Classic car owners who have a surprisingly strong lobby have campaigned to keep E5 fuel, which remains the case for super unleaded that you'll find in most petrol stations. But what does it actually do to older cars? 2 main things. The first is that ethanol mixes nicely with water, which is usually not a good thing for any metal or internal parts of your car. If and when the 2 mix in your fuel tank, they'll sink to the bottom over time, and when you're running on dregs, you'll be pushing all of that water to the vital components in the engine, which can cause corrosion, rough running, and all sorts of other problems. The second issue is that ethanol itself can become acidic, making it pretty aggressive to metal, plastic, and rubber parts in your engine, particularly around the fuel system, as well as gaskets and seals, which can then in turn cause further issues. Rubber fuel lines seem to be the key item that perish more quickly with ethanol. Newer cars are not only built to withstand and adapt to E10 fuel, E10 is actually the standard fuel used for emissions testing on cars and has been since 2016, so it's highly likely that any newer car you buy will have been built with E10 in mind. In total, 87% of cars on the road in the UK have been confirmed as fine for E10 fuel, with a further 4% not yet confirmed and 9% are meant to be incompatible. However, it's important to remember that E10 fuel isn't a new thing. To demonstrate this, Mazda have officially stated that all cars post 2002 are compatible with E10, so you'd assume assume that my 1997 MX-5 wouldn't survive on E10 fuel for a prolonged period. However, MX-5 specialists note that despite E10 being used widely in Europe for years now, the key problem that was expected, corroded fuel lines, hasn't been a common or even notable issue. I've personally found that mine is a bit less happy after a cold start recently, but to be honest, I think that's because it's getting colder, and my MX-5 hates the cold. In reality, the likelihood is that Mazda didn't specify to their suppliers before 2002 that fuel lines needed to be E10 compatible, so can't confirm that cars would work with E10 before then. Even though from what I could find from MX-5 specialists, their fuel lines are exactly the same between a 1989 MX-5 and a 2003 MX-5. So what I'm basically saying is if you're worried about your car, do some research into it and see what's expected to go wrong with E10, and many parts can actually be retrofitted relatively cheaply. So we've spoken about what E10 is, why we're moving towards it, and what the impacts are. Unless you're in the 9% of incompatible cars, and even then, probably not all of them, it shouldn't be too much of an issue for you or your car depending on your socioeconomic status. Why then are some people up in arms about it, and why is the media dramatizing it so much? I've seen so many articles during my research which say that motorists are anti-E10 and people's cars are smelling funny or running funny or getting really low MPG. Now that's where a bit of opinion comes into this, so apologies in advance and feel free to ignore me or disagree with me. But most of the articles I could find where there are problems arising from E10 fuel are absolutely awfully written. See this article from The Express. E10 fuel changes cause a burning smell from car after refueling, say drivers. I've read the entire article and many like this, and to be blunt, it's entirely unhelpful. When it says drivers, it provides absolutely no indication of how many drivers. It simply says drivers. Now that word is a plural, so you know it must be anywhere between 2 drivers and the total number of drivers that exist. In the article it offers only 4 Twitter users, of which only 3 of them actually mention any burning smell. Add on the fact that in the article it's even explained that E10 might smell slightly different when it burns to E5, and it annoys me even more. Saying there's a burning smell doesn't give any real indication of what's going on, and instead directs the reader's imagination to think, oh no, a burning smell from my engine. That's terrible. E10 fuel must be bad. Now I'm not saying that the article in and of itself is incorrect, but it's just misleading, and it creates a problem where there might not be one. It's the equivalent of YouTube clickbait when there's no substance in the actual video. But these articles are specifically designed to sensationalize the issue and create an emotive response. And if you've watched my previous video on the fuel crisis, which I think is highly the result of media sensationalism, the ability of the media to play on, create, and exacerbate public opinion about an issue is troubling, at least in my opinion. Quick side note, I'm actually editing this video right now and adding in a whole bunch of articles, and I wanted to mention that pretty much every single anti-E10 fuel article is written by the exact same person. Like, if that doesn't raise any red flags, and the fact that all these articles are pretty poorly written, apologies in advance to that person, I'm not calling you out, I'm not trying to draw you out, but the fact that this one person is talking about E10 fuel, mate, people are mad. Don't hate E10 because the media made a bunch of badly written articles that tell you nothing about the issue. Hate E10 because it actually messes with your car, if it actually messes with your car. I've literally had to explain this to a very close family member who said their 2012 Vauxhall Astra was running rough since putting E10 in the tank. I reminded them that their 2012 Vauxhall Astra had been running rough since about 2012 and was pretty rubbish in basically every possible way. The fuel was not the issue in their case, at least. So to conclude, E10 has been used around the world in the same spec cars that we have in the UK for many years. It's not that big a deal for the vast majority of cars, and while yes, it's a bit annoying that efficiency might be impacted, I don't think it's something to lose a bunch of sleep over unless your car will certainly be impacted by the negative effects of ethanol. And if your car will be impacted, then yeah, I agree, it sucks, especially as someone who loves classic cars, in most cases more than newer cars. And this will be a case by case basis, but if I was running a classic car, I would already know that maintenance is a key part of the ownership experience, using the right oils, the right care equipment, the right warm up and warm down routine, the right specialists and maintenance schedules, and the right car parts, which all cost money. With all that in mind, it's not ideal, but I would also make sure I put the right fuel in despite the 12p additional cost of super unleaded. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe as well if you're new. I'd love to hear your thoughts on and experiences of running buying a car on E10 fuel. As always, a massive thanks to the patrons for their support, and to you guys as well for watching. I'll see you in the next one.
Listen.